Good morning. Have you seen the faces of the plaintiffs in the NAR antitrust lawsuit out in Kansas City? They have brought as plaintiffs regular old Americans that a jury can relate to, and they're profiled today in Inman. Who are the plaintiffs? Look at these people. These are regular old people here. And these are going to be very, very relatable to the jury. Very relatable to the jury. Absolutely, positively. The first one is a former high school English teacher. I mean, right? I mean, that's someone that can be very relatable and likable to the jury. We'll scroll down here and find the next one here. After that, we have Rhonda. Rhonda is a former school psychologist and public schools advocate with 3 children. Another incredibly relatable person. And these things matter, right? Jeremy, he's one of the other plaintiffs. Who is he? Let's see. He's an attorney. That's not the best field, but he specializes in elder law. So he's an elder abuse attorney. He's keeping grandma safe. Another very relatable type of profession and person, right? He confirmed he did not work in antitrust law. Okay. He sold his home, in this case, for $205,000. He paid a 6% commission. 3% went to Keller Williams, and 3% went to the buyer's Reese Nichols, whoever that is, agent. So it must be some agency out in Missouri. So another very relatable, nice plaintiff. And the last plaintiff that they have out there is Gerard Breet. I think that's how. He's the son of a factory worker and was a police officer for nearly a decade. Now is the executive director of Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And he tells a story about how he's cash-strapped when he bought his first home. These are incredibly relatable people. The realtors are going to lose this case, right? No one believes that they're going to win this case. I suppose, they could always surprise us and win. And they've had any number of legal victories in the past. So, it's not impossible. I'm just saying it's not likely. And a settlement is also likely. There are some periods. Zorn was out on industry relations, I think, the other day, and he was saying there are some times during this type of lawsuit where you're more likely to see settlements. You would imagine that the agencies would settle first, but and you can settle in the middle of a trial. Although I think as you do so, the more it proceeds, the weaker your position gets. Yesterday, apparently, there was some I have my expert, you have your expert baloney. They're going to have a lot of experts. There was some professor from Texas A&M or wherever. We're not going to cover that. It doesn't really matter. And again, I think the bigger situation here is, what does the judge do in the settlement? What does the Department of Justice do when they're highly likely going to insert themselves in this case, just like they did in the MLS PIN case here in Massachusetts with their statement of interest, and or what the FTC is going to do, as we covered in yesterday's live stream. Once again, shout out to Dave DeWiggins at Next Home Realty. And if you missed the FTC potential plan of attack, you want to go watch yesterday's live stream, which of course is available on our YouTube channel. The Real Estate Board of New York yesterday, Real Estate Board of New York, which, if I'm not mistaken, they're independent from the National Association of Realtors, put up a rule change yesterday that will require sellers to pay buyer agents directly. Gee, I don't know if this is really a change without much. I think this is what's that catchphrase? A distinction without a difference. Let's go to the chalkboard. Let's go to the chalkboard and kind of show you what I mean by that, or the whiteboard, I should say. The current system is technically the seller pays the seller agency. A lot of agents don't even know this themselves, that the seller pays the seller agency let's just say 5%. And then technically from a accounting point of view, then they share a portion of that with the buyer agency according to the listing agreement. And the money flows from the seller to the seller agency to the buyer agency. There's an amazing amount of people in our business that don't even understand that's how it works for the vast majority of the time. What the Real Estate Board of New York is going to be saying and going to be requiring is that they're going to delete the middleman, basically, and the seller will now be required to pay the buyer agency directly. Jack, how does the buyer agent get paid? The buyer agent gets paid according to the comp plan. They get paid after the buyer agency gets paid. Remember, at least in almost every state that I'm aware of, the agent actually doesn't earn the commission directly. The agency earns the commission, and then it's shared with the agent per the comp plan. So I think the Real Estate Board of New York is going this strategy here. This is, and I'd love to hear your comments on this, trying to avoid any type of legal liability. I don't think it's going to work. I think it's just basically an accounting trick. Because they're still going to be requiring the seller to pay the buyer agency, whether it passes through the seller agency or not. I don't really think from a legal point of view, I don't think if this would ever go to a trial in a copycat case in New York State, I don't think a jury made up of school teachers, firefighters, postmen, used car dealership, housewives, house husbands, whatever, I don't think regular people are going to see a difference in that. So good try, Real Estate Board of New York, but I don't really think that's going to protect you against any potential copycat lawsuit, but we'll see, right? We'll see how that goes. By the way, on Wednesday, I did a it wasn't a live stream, but I did an interview with Seth Quintel. He runs a brokerage in Massachusetts, Waypoint, down in the South Coast, down in Fall River. He just started his brokerage, and he sent me an email about a week and a half ago or so. Jack, I had some questions about starting a brokerage, and I was wondering if I could ask you. And I wrote back to him, and I said, well, these are really good questions. Do you think we could make it into a video so that other people could benefit? And that is also now up on our YouTube channel. That's not my best face there, but no, it's going to play an ad, of course. Anyways, that is now up on our YouTube channel, and you should go over there and watch it. Especially if you're starting out on your brokerage, you're thinking about going out on your starting out on your own. By the way, if anyone is out there that has in Massachusetts at least 3 years as a salesperson working part-time, 25 hours a week, and you're not thinking about getting your broker's license, you're high, right? What are you smoking? Because you should probably sign up at the Online Real Estate Academy, onlinerealestateacademy.com, brokerschoolonline.com, shameless self-promotion. But you need that because who knows what is coming down the regulatory pike. And I think you need that for your flexibility of your career. If you're eligible, you gotta have been a salesperson for 3 years. It seems to me that it's just a matter of time before they up that requirement, hint, hint, and make it more difficult to become a broker. The last time they made it more difficult to become a broker was in 2011. They recently made the exam more difficult here in 2023. And I think it won't be long before they make the threshold requirement to become a broker even higher. So sign up before they do that. The chances of a rate hike coming in for November have declined significantly. The rate hike situation is looking like not so much of a rate hike in November, right? Nobody thinks they're going to raise rates in November after Powell's discussion yesterday. Pretty much, market is betting on 98.4% they stay the same in November. We had a lot of Fed speak yesterday. We had Powell. I didn't think Powell's presentation was anything different than before. Basically, just an admission, a very eloquent admission that they're flying by the seat of their pants, right? They don't know, and they're just watching the data, which is almost all lagging data. As he said, coming out of Wyoming, navigating by the stars under cloudy skies. That's basically what the Fed is all about. And yesterday, mortgage rates for the second day in a row, according to Mortgage News Daily, over 8%. I remember when we first hit 7%, and people said, this will just be transitory, right? Remember that that mortgage rate's over 7. No, this can't stay. We can't have mortgage rates over 7%. It's not going to last. Oh, this will definitely go back to the 6. This will be back in 6.5 in another week or two. Don't you worry. Then it hit 7.5%, and people are like, "Oh no, it will be back to 7 in just a minute. Don't you worry. It's going to go back down." And I'm actually hearing the same thing. Oh, it's 8 now. Oh, it'll be back to 7.4 before you know it. Oh, don't you worry. It's transitory. Here at Mortgage News Daily, we're going to actually hear an interview that Matthew Graham from Mortgage News Daily did yesterday. Today's rate spike happened in spite of Fed Chairman Powell's confirming, this is very, very important, confirming that the Fed is likely done hiking Fed funds rate, at least for now. To be fair, the Fed fund rate doesn't dictate mortgage rates, nor does it even correlate very well much of the time. This is especially true right now when short-term rates are higher than long-term rates, an inverted yield curve. And of course, when we have an inverted yield curve, we usually get a recession. We usually get a recession when we have an inverted yield curve. What Graham is saying here is, once again, just because the Fed is pausing on our rate hikes, that doesn't necessarily mean that mortgage rates can't go up anymore. Let's listen to Graham on CNBC. This is from yesterday, I think. Here we go.
Matthew has been saying this Treasury yield, it's over. It's over. I've been hearing this for weeks, and it just keeps going. So I hope you're
right. The hostess here is saying, hey, this is going to turn around. She's been hearing this for weeks, but it just keeps going.
Right.
I mean, we don't know exactly when it's going to be over, but we do hear a chorus of Fed speakers, especially last week, in a very notable way, saying that they are restrictive and that they can wait and see what happens with the policy filtering through to the economy. And if that's the case, then there's only so much more that the long end of the yield curve, which is more tied to mortgage rates, is going to rise before we have hit the ceiling.
I tweeted the 8% mortgage rate yesterday purposefully to see, just what kind of psychological response there was. And nearly everybody, Matthew, responds by saying a crash is coming. A crash is coming. They either say it's unaffordable, an entire generation is ruined, or they say a crash is coming. What are your thoughts?
Oh, so many thoughts. First off, what Diana was just saying about supply is critical. So we need to decide how we're going to define a crash. Are we talking about a crash in home values? Because if supply is the tightest since the 80s, then it's really hard to get values to crash.
Right. Supply. There's no supply, right? How are prices going to crash if there's nothing on the market?
8% rates obviously pose a big problem for first-time home buyers. So, that is a big issue. But when I think of crashes for the housing market and for the mortgage market, I think of things like 2007, 2008. And we're just not seeing the same sort of dynamics there in terms of risky loan profiles and risk-taking behavior among borrowers. And pretty.
All right. So we heard enough of him. Basically, he's saying that we're not going to be looking at the same type of crash. We're looking at a frozen market. We have a question here from a buyer. Let's see if we put this up on the screen here, because this is the essential question. Here it is here. Can't we get it up there? When do you believe this case will be over and law will be implemented. Consumer is bleeding. So I guess you're asking, when is this case going to be over in Kansas City? The expectation would be early November. I think November 10th is when they're expected to have a verdict, so to speak, in November. I don't really think that case is the ultimate outcome of what's going to happen here in terms of commissions. I really do believe that either the Department of Justice, the FTC are going to be pushing for a ban on commissions so that the seller cannot pay the buyer side agent. I'm thoroughly convinced, given the current administration, that that's what they're pushing for. I mean, it was quite clear in the MLS PIN statement of interest from the Department of Justice, and also what we covered in yesterday's live stream, that that's what they're pushing for. So that could change if we have a change in presidential administrations, a significant change. But otherwise, I think that's the road you're going on. In terms of 8% interest, and consumers bleeding on that in all sorts of different ways, I don't really see that changing all that soon. And also, let's put that into perspective. If you're 40 years old right now, you've lived almost your entire life since you kind of got out of college or since your early 20s in a low interest rate environment. Since you've been 25 to 40, you've lived in a low interest rate environment, and now you're freaking out at 8% interest rate, and I get that. But historically, 8% is kind of in the middle, maybe a little bit on the southern side of the middle. What's horrific about this is, and thank you so much for your question, is that it's 8% and prices are high and there's nothing to choose from. That's kind of the double whammy. 8% in and of itself is not 18%. Let me tell you, when I was a kid and it was 18%, I mean, that's fearful. Like, whoa, you're headed towards Venezuela, right? 8%, I hate to say this to you, whatever generation letter it is, but if you're 37 and you're looking to buy a house, or 32 and you're looking to buy a house, and you say 8%, you're like, what the? I hate to say to you, it's normal over the course of 50 years. That's a normal rate, right? So suck it up, buttercup, I guess. I hate to say that, but that's what it is. Is that going to change anytime soon? Remember, there are basically two levers to interest rates and inflation. Two levers to that. It's what the Fed can do and what Congress can do in terms of government spending. And what's really going to drive, even if we don't have any more Fed rate hikes, even if the Fed pauses, what is not pausing is the other lever on inflation. And the other lever on inflation is our massive, massive federal debt. Massive federal debt. I mean, just look at this chart. In millions of dollars, is basically trillions. We were, not that long ago, we were at like 23 trillion, which I thought was like, oh my God. Now we're at 32 trillion in debt. 32 trillion. We are running deficit. We're writing checks we can't cash, right? 33.5 trillion is actually the number. It will soon to become 50 trillion, and 50 will become 100. And here's the most important part. Because real GDP or productivity will not match the exponential rise in debt. The only way to keep up with interest payments is to fake productivity through money expansion and inflation. So you will ultimately pay for it. Thank you, James Lavish. Not only you, but your grandchildren are ultimately going to pay for it. Hey, it's okay. You run a business. You know it's okay to borrow money if that money is going to go to work for you, and you're going to open a McDonald's, and you're going to have productivity, in other words, profit, where you can pay back the loan. But as a big picture, our society is not adding enough productivity to cover the debt. that's where we are. And when that happens, the only way to get out of that is to stop borrowing, stop digging, which Congress isn't going to do, or just print more money in order to. It's a circular firing swap. It's insanity. So just because the Fed has paused, do I think interest rates are going to go higher? Sadly, I just don't see it. I don't see any other option there. Now, we've heard a lot of talk. Here's some good news. All right. Sorry for the pessimism there. And thank you so much for your question. Here's some good news. We've heard so much talk about Taylor Swift impacting the economy. And that's been true. But here's even a bigger impact upon the economy. It dropped today, and that is the new Rolling Stones album. For those of us at a certain age, like myself, this is a big event. And I know that Ronnie, Mick, and Keith are actually personally packaging up my vinyl version of their new album, Hackney Diamonds, at the warehouse right now. And they're personally signing the album and sending it to me. Well, okay, maybe not. They did have a concert last night in New York City. They must have forgot to send me the invite. We have another question. Let's see what this question is here. If a co-op goes away, how do you avoid dual agency? Says Craig. So let me just rephrase or expand upon that question, Craig. Basically, Craig is saying, if cooperating commission goes away, how do you avoid dual agency? So here in Massachusetts, at least, and in some other states, dual agency is 100% legal. And for those of you who want to know what dual agency is a situation where the agent represents the seller and the buyer, but delivers fewer fiduciary duties. And this is legal in a number of states. Massachusetts is one of them. So, Craig, I think that if there is a ban at some point, which won't be tomorrow, but at some point, if there's a ban that bans the seller from paying buyer side fees, I do believe that will be an increase in dual agency, because I'll do a listing appointment and I'll say, we'll sell the house for, I'll sell your house for 1.5%. And, $1 million house, I'll make what? That's 15 grand. I used this analogy the other day. And the buyer's agent can get paid by the buyer. But there probably won't be a buyer's agent, because I'll have the listing, I'll do all the open houses, and I'll probably find the buyer on my own. And so would that be bad for buyers? I think there's a lot of unintended consequences. This could actually be bad for buyers. Great question, Craig. But for those of us who have a dedicated base of people who want to do business with us as a listing agent, we might actually make more money, right? So, So there is definitely an opportunity to make more. Sorry about that. There's definitely an opportunity to make more money if you're a listing agent machine. So great question, Keith. Thank you Craig. Thank you so much for asking it. Will a buyer's agent completely disappear? Pedro, I don't think a buyer's agent will completely disappear. I think it will still be a legal thing. For instance, we have this thing in Massachusetts. I don't know if you have it in your states, but we have this thing called sub-agency here in Massachusetts, which is legal, but it's absolutely a rarity. And so I don't think it's going to go away as a legal thing, but I do think it will basically go away as a if there's a ban, it will become legal but rare, I guess is the question. Good question, Pedro, but I don't think it will go away. What's the 10-year at this morning? 10-year at this morning, 4.971. I heard that it touched 5 yesterday. And I think it wouldn't be unreasonable to have some type of pause in the 10-year Treasury. Add about 310 points to this, and you get the mortgage rate for the 30-year fixed average with good credit. So I wouldn't be surprised if we have a little bit of a pullback. until sometime next week where the market regains some momentum. Very quickly, I think the next kind of level of resistance on this is 5.14. If I'm not mistaken, somebody can fact check me on that. We did have existing home sales from the National Association of Realtors drop below 4 million units on an annualized basis yesterday. We fell just below to 3.96. So, yeah, if you're an agent out there, finding these deals, because, right, if you're an agent out there, there's not a lot of transactions. Although I am happy to tell you that we have a closing today. It's $1 million closing today. We have a $1 million closing today, so I'm happy. But there's just not a lot of closings. And as the commentator on this tweet here says, to top it all off, oh, you can't see that. I'm sorry, my face is on top of it. Sorry. We're headed into the hibernation season, effectively. And it'll be really kind of difficult to find out whether we have a spike in inventory is a normal seasonal thing, or whether the spike in inventory exceeds the normal seasonal thing. And I think the measure there, we're going to have to take a really close look. Inventory usually goes up a little bit, but then there's also I'm going to take the house off because I don't want people traipsing through my house during the holidays. And if I'm going to sell it, I'll sell it April 1st. A lot of people take their house off the market. But it'll be really interesting to see if we have a higher than normal upswing in inventory over the next couple of months. And I was talking to an investor client of mine the other day. He's looking for an investment property. And I said to him, let's watch and see. He has his eye on a particular class of property. And I said, let's watch to see if some of these people keep their property on the market in the dead of winter. Because once that cold settles in and no one's going out to see houses, that's when he can write an offer that would be very aggressive. So and he's like, well, there hasn't been any price drops yet. Well, just because there hasn't been any price drops, but as those days on market go up and it's ice cold outside, you might be able to, make a deal. So thank you so much, Pedro, for that question. Bill's got a question. My good friend Bill. The alternative to dual agency would be sub-agency. Would this be a better situation? I don't know, Bill, right away if every state has sub-agency. And so for those of you who don't understand, sub-agency works as if the buyer's agent actually is an agent of the list agent. Yeah, so I wish I had this drawn. Maybe tomorrow or Monday is our next show at 8:30 a.m. on Monday. Maybe on Monday we'll diagram out how that works. And that is kind of back to the future, because since we created buyer agency in the early 90s, I think it was, we've kept sub-agency as a legal structure, but it's effectively nobody uses it. So yeah, Bill, it's a very good observation. Sub-agency could come back as a thing in states that allow it. So maybe on Monday we will diagram what sub-agency is. It's one of the more difficult questions on the exam. Over at Reese Media, I saw this article from the broker of Benchmark Realty. He's a broker in Tennessee, and he wrote basically an op-ed piece over here, a potential path forward for NAR. And basically he highlights, what's his name? We should give him credit for his name here. Philip Cantrell, Benchmark Realty in Tennessee. Gradually, at first, and then suddenly, this group, the National Association of Realtors, lost sight of the fact that, like any trade organization, it exists primarily to serve the interest of the majority dues-paying membership. Serving the membership is the reason for being. It's not a social engineer, not to serve the lords and ladies of leadership. It's most certainly not to serve the various cliques of special interest. This organization exists to serve the greater membership, period. It has morphed into a self-aggrandizing, self-perpetuating, at any cost, maladroit organization that is so inwardly focused, it has become completely tone deaf to the needs of the membership. In short, it has lost faith with the greater membership. Thank you, Phil Contrell from Benchmark Realty in Tennessee. I think that's what we've all been saying. And I think that's what's really at stake in the current Kansas City case is whether or not NAR can continue to exist by forcing NAR membership in order to get MLS membership. I think NAR is fighting for its life as an organization, and it forgot who to serve. That's why I saw this coming 4 or 5 years ago when I realized that NAR was really not looking out for me, right? I own a tiny little agency here in Massachusetts. I'm no expert, by the way. I'm just some guy that learned how to stream on YouTube, right? That's it. I'm no expert. I'm figuring out with you folks. But NAR forgot why it existed and continued to persist as an organization because it ties the purchase of two things together: membership in the realtors with MLS PIN membership. Now, thank God, thank the lucky stars for MLS PIN. By the way, they heard my rant from last week and they emailed me back, and we're friends again. So thank you, MLS PIN. And basically, I've been fairly positive about MLS PIN on this channel. So thank you for listening to me about that issue. Thank you. But that's the reason 4 or 5 years ago I said, how do I get myself out of the Realtor Association? And the only reason why I was a member of the Realtors, because I don't need it to be a MLS member here in Massachusetts. The only reason is because of the forms. So I sat down and I said, okay, what do I pay for the forms? Or what do I pay for Realtor membership every year? And it's like, okay, $700. Multiply that by, let's just say, another 20 years in the business. Okay, so that's 15 grand. And if I could recruit agents without having them, could I recruit more agents because they wouldn't have to be Realtor members because I'd be saving them $700? But what type of recruitment tool would that be for me? Because it would be a competitive advantage. And I did the math over 20 years, and I said, it's worth it for me with legal counsel to develop my own proprietary set of forms. And if I own the forms, I don't need to be a realtor anymore. And that's exactly what I did. So that's why I'm not a realtor. So that's one of the reasons. But excellent article by Philip Cantrell from Benchmark. You can get that, by the way, over at reesmedia.com, reesmedia.com. Let's see if we have any more questions before we continue or before we wrap up today's show. Nope, I think that is all the questions. Go out and get your Rolling Stones album, Hackney Diamonds. It's fantastic. I did listen to it this morning. But until then, unless anything spikes over the day, we will see you Monday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. Thanks so much for joining us. Loved your questions. Have a great weekend. Go make some money.